Thanksgiving was supposed to be special. I cooked everything from scratch, decorated the table, and waited for my son and his family. But they didn't show up, not even a text. Hours later, when I finally called to find out what happened, the truth I heard left me shaken and heartbroken. I still hear her laugh sometimes, that dismissive, careless sound that cut right through me like a shard of ice. Because that laugh, it wasn't just about a forgotten dinner. It was the sound of my family tearing itself apart, the moment I realized they hadn't just replaced me in their lives, but erased me from their very hearts. And that, my friends, was a line they never should have crossed. The cranberry sauce was still radiating a faint warmth on the counter when my phone buzzed at 3:47 p.m. I remember the exact, excruciating time because I'd been staring at the kitchen clock, watching those minutes crawl by like wounded animals, each tick a fresh stab of anxiety. Shane, my son, and his family, my daughter-in-law Marissa, and my grandchildren, Harvey and Destiny, they were supposed to arrive at 3:47 minutes late wasn't entirely out of character for them, but my stomach? It had been twisting into angry, desperate knots since noon. You see, I'm Morgan, and this wasn't just any Thanksgiving. This was supposed to be my redemption Thanksgiving. The one where I proved, once and for all, that I could still be the beating heart of this family, even after Dylan, my husband of 28 years, decided that Savannah's younger body and brighter smile were worth throwing away nearly 3 decades of marriage. Even after he packed his bags and moved into her pristine, suburban palace, leaving me here in our old farmhouse. The one where Shane learned to walk, where we carved pumpkins every single October, where Christmas mornings used to sparkle with genuine, unrestrained laughter. Oh, how I clung to those memories. The dining room, though? It was absolutely perfect. I'd poured 3 days of my life into preparing it, polishing my grandmother's silver until it gleamed, reflecting every tiny imperfection in my worried face. I'd ironed the lace tablecloth, the same one that had graced our table for every major holiday since Shane was born, with a desperate hope that this year would be different. The good china, the very set Dylan and I received as a wedding gift, a symbol of our forever, it caught the warm, vanilla-scented glow of the candles I'd arranged down the center. 5 place settings. 5 chairs pulled out, patiently waiting. 5 members of what I desperately, foolishly hoped was still my family. Shane had called 2 weeks ago, his voice carrying that careful, almost guarded tone he developed since the divorce. "Mom, we'll be there for Thanksgiving. I promise. Marissa's excited to see you, and the kids have been asking about your stuffing." Those words? They felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in an ocean of loneliness. I clung to that promise, replayed it over and over during sleepless nights when this old house felt too big, too quiet, too empty. I'd started cooking at dawn, driven by a primal need to recreate a sense of home, a sense of us. Harvey's apple pie, the one with extra cinnamon because he always said it reminded him of autumn leaves. Destiny's favorite macaroni and cheese, made from scratch with 3 different cheeses and a golden crust of breadcrumbs on top, just the way she'd requested last Christmas, before everything truly fell apart. Shane's beloved green bean casserole, piled high with those crispy onions he used to sneak from the container when he thought I wasn't looking. And the turkey, a magnificent, golden, glistening beast stuffed with my mother's cornbread dressing recipe, passed down for 3 generations, each bite a whisper of history. Every single dish held a memory. Every aroma carried the ghost of holidays past, of a time when we were whole. When Dylan would carve the turkey with theatrical flourishes, while Shane rolled his eyes in mock embarrassment, and Marissa actually laughed at his dad's jokes. Before Savannah, his new wife, entered our lives like a tornado, leaving destruction in her wake, all while making everyone believe she was the sunshine after the storm. The call came as I was adjusting the gravy boat for what felt like the 10th time, my hands trembling slightly from a combination of caffeine and raw nerves. Shane's name flashed on my phone screen, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Maybe they were just running late. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe, just maybe. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded distant, almost annoyingly distracted. Background noise filtered through the line, laughter, multiple conversations, the clink of silverware against plates. A celebration happening somewhere else. My stomach dropped. "Shane, honey, where are you? Dinner's ready, and it's getting cold." I tried desperately to keep my voice light, casual, even as dread began pooling in my stomach like ice water, chilling me from the inside out. "Yeah, about that." He paused, and in that agonizing silence, I heard my world begin to crack. We're not gonna make it. Plans changed last minute. Changed? But you promised, you said. My voice cracked despite my best efforts. I know what I said, but Savannah invited us over, and the kids really wanted to see their other grandparents. Dylan's parents are here too, and it's just easier, you know? Easier. The word hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. 28 years of marriage, 31 years of being Shane's mother, and I'd been reduced to the inconvenient option. The difficult choice. The grandmother who required effort. Can I talk to Marissa? My voice barely qualified as a whisper. She's busy with the kids right now, but she says hi. Another lie. I could distinctly hear her distinctive laugh in the background, bright and carefree. She was having the time of her life at someone else's table, while I sat alone with enough food to feed an army. Shane, please. I've been cooking all day. I made Harvey's pie. Destiny's. Mom, don't guilt trip me. We'll do something next weekend. Okay, gotta go. The line went dead before I could even respond. I stared at the phone, my reflection trapped in its dark screen, a 53-year-old woman who'd just been dismissed like an outdated appointment. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down beside the untouched rolls still warm from the oven. The silence that followed was deafening. Not the comfortable quiet of anticipation, but the hollow emptiness of abandonment. The candles flickered, casting dancing shadows across the empty chairs. The turkey sat cooling in its juices, the cranberry sauce forming a thin, unsettling skin on top. The mashed potatoes slowly lost their perfect, fluffy peaks. But it was the laugh, that damn laugh, that finally destroyed me. 30 minutes later, when desperation finally overwhelmed dignity, I called Shane's number again. This time, Marissa answered on the second ring, her voice bubbling with wine and unbridled joy. Oh, hi, Morgan. She sounded genuinely surprised, as if she'd forgotten I existed. Shane told me you called earlier. Marissa, I don't understand. Shane promised. Oh, that? Her laugh was light, dismissive, the sound of someone who never had to sit alone on a holiday. We're at a real grandma's house. Savannah made this incredible spread, and Dylan's parents brought the most amazing desserts. The kids are having such a blast with their cousins. Real grandma? The words hit me like shards of glass, each syllable drawing blood. A real grandma. As if 31 years of kissing scraped knees, reading bedtime stories, and making birthday cakes had been some elaborate dress rehearsal for the real thing. As if every Christmas morning, every bedtime song, every fierce hug during thunderstorms had been merely practice for when the real grandmother showed up. I made Harvey's favorite pie. I whispered, hating how pathetic I sounded. That's sweet, but Savannah has a whole dessert table. Professional bakery stuff, Instagram-worthy, you know. Another laugh, this one cutting even deeper. Anyway, we'll catch up soon. Happy Thanksgiving! The call ended, leaving me standing alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of my hopes. Real grandma? Savannah, who'd known my grandchildren for exactly 18 months, was the real grandmother. I, who had changed their diapers, who had walked floors with them during teething nights, who had taught them their colors and letters, was apparently the understudy. I walked through my dining room like a ghost during her former life. The gravy had formed a skin. The rolls were cold. The candles had burned down to nubs while I'd waited for a family that was never coming. My reflection caught in the silver gravy boat, distorted, fractured, barely recognizable. 28 years of marriage, 31 years of motherhood, 60 years of life. And in one afternoon, one devastating conversation, one carelessly cruel laugh, I'd been erased. Not just forgotten, but replaced. Upgraded. Traded in for a newer model who made Instagram-worthy desserts and had Dylan's parents' approval. I blew out the candles one by one, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling like prayers no one would answer. The house fell into darkness, except for the kitchen light where enough food for 5 people waited for no one. The real grandma was probably taking pictures of her perfect table, surrounded by my former family, while I stood alone in the ruins of my Thanksgiving dreams. For the first time since Dylan left, I didn't cry. Instead, something harder and colder settled in my chest. Something that whispered, this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. That cold, hard feeling in my chest crystallized overnight, transforming into something sharp and purposeful. I woke before dawn, not from sadness, but from a newfound, terrifying clarity. The house still smelled like turkey and disappointment, but something fundamental had shifted inside me while I slept. The woman who had waited by flickering candles and cold gravy was gone. Someone else had taken her place. I walked through my living room in my bathrobe, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors Dylan and I had refinished together 15 years ago. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts of happier times. Everything looked the same, yet everything felt profoundly different. The family photos lining the mantelpiece seemed to mock me now, captured moments of a life that had been built on shifting sand. My eyes stopped on the large silver frame in the center. Last Christmas. The 5 of us, gathered around my tree, the one Shane and Marissa had insisted on having at Grandma Morgan's house because it was tradition. Destiny, then 7, was missing her front teeth in the most adorable way. Harvey, 5, was trying to look serious but couldn't hide his excitement about the presents underneath. Shane had his arm around my shoulders, and Marissa was actually smiling, not the fake Instagram smile she'd perfected recently, but a genuine expression of contentment. I remembered that day with painful precision. How Marissa had complimented my roast. How Shane had fallen asleep on my couch watching football. How the children had begged to stay overnight. "This feels like home," Marissa had whispered, while helping me load the dishwasher. And I'd felt such gratitude for her acceptance, her inclusion of me in their expanding family circle. All lies. Every smile, every compliment, every moment of warmth. A theater performed for an audience of one gullible woman who believed she still mattered. I lifted the frame from the mantel, my fingers tracing the silver edges. The glass was spotless. I'd cleaned it just last week in preparation for Thanksgiving, wanting everything perfect for their visit. The irony tasted bitter on my tongue. I'd polished the evidence of my own delusion. Walking to the kitchen table, I set the frame down beside the salt and pepper shakers Dylan's mother had given us as a housewarming gift 30 years ago. Everything in this house held memories, but memories, I was learning, could be weapons when wielded correctly. I opened the frame carefully, my movements deliberate and controlled. The photo slipped out easily, and I laid it flat on the oak surface. 5 faces stared up at me from glossy paper. A family frozen in time, in lies, in a happiness that had apparently been utterly one-sided. The scissors were in the kitchen drawer, right where they'd always been, nestled between the can opener and the meat thermometer. Heavy steel with red plastic handles, the same ones I'd used to cut out paper snowflakes with the children just 11 months ago. Destiny had been fascinated by how the folded paper opened into intricate patterns. "It's like magic, Grandma Morgan," she'd said, her small hands clapping in delight. What a joke. The only magic here was how quickly love could transform into something else entirely. I positioned Shane's face between the scissor blades first. My son, who'd promised to be there, who'd let me believe I still had a place in his world. The metal sliced through his smile with a soft whisper. His face separated from the rest of us cleanly, completely, leaving a Shane-shaped hole in our family portrait. Marissa came next. The woman who'd laughed about being at a real grandma's house. Who'd spoken those words like they were nothing, like they wouldn't haunt my sleep and poison my waking hours. Her face was slightly blurred in the photo. She'd been turning toward Shane when I snapped the picture, caught in a moment of movement. How appropriate. Always in motion, always ready to move on to something better. The scissors made the same soft sound as they carved through her features. Snip. Gone. I held the 2 severed faces in my palm, studying them like an archaeologist examining artifacts from a dead civilization. Shane's eyes looked up at me with that familiar warmth that had fooled me for 31 years. Marissa's profile, caught in mid-laugh, seemed to echo her cruel words from yesterday's phone call. But the children remained. Destiny and Harvey, their innocent faces still attached to the photo, still connected to me. They hadn't chosen this betrayal. They were casualties, collateral damage in their parents' casual cruelty. My fingers traced their images gently, remembering bedtime stories and scrape-knee kisses, birthday parties, and Christmas mornings. The envelope came from my desk drawer. Crisp white paper, the expensive kind I use for thank you notes and sympathy cards. How fitting. This would be both. I arranged the torn pieces inside carefully, face down against the bottom of the envelope. Shane and Marissa reduced to paper scraps, lying flat and lifeless like roadkill on a highway. The symbolism felt perfect. They turned their backs on me, so now they could lie face down in their own destruction. The red pen had been a gift from Harvey last Mother's Day, part of a little school craft set he'd proudly presented. "For writing special messages, Grandma," He'd explained with that gap-toothed grin. He'd been right. This was definitely a special message. I flipped the mutilated photo over, and the blank white back stared at me like an empty canvas, waiting for truth. The pen felt substantial in my hand as I pressed it to the paper. Red ink flowed like blood from a fresh wound, forming words that had been burning in my chest since yesterday's phone call. A table set for love, but only ghosts showed up. The words looked stark against the white background, dramatic and final. But I wasn't finished. Yesterday had taught me that subtlety was wasted on people who could dismiss 30 years of devotion with a laugh. The real ones were never family. My handwriting was steadier than I'd expected. Each letter formed with deliberate precision. The red ink caught the morning light streaming through my kitchen window, looking darker than I'd intended. Good. Dark matched my mood. This is how you erased yourselves from my life, and now, from my legacy. I capped the pen and set it down beside the ruined photograph. The message was complete, perfect in its brutal honesty. No begging, no pleading, no desperate attempts to guilt them into loving me. Just a simple statement of fact, delivered in language they couldn't possibly misinterpret or dismiss. The envelope sealed with a soft hiss, trapping Shane and Marissa's faces inside like prisoners in a paper cell. I wrote their address in careful block letters. The address of the house they bought 3 years ago, the one they'd invited me to exactly twice, both times for major holidays when excluding me would have looked bad to Marissa's parents. The post office was only 10 minutes away, but I took my time getting dressed. This wasn't a moment to rush. I chose my navy dress, the one Shane had complimented at his last birthday dinner. I applied lipstick, not for them, but for me, for the woman I was becoming. The postal clerk was a young man with kind eyes who smiled when I approached his window. "Just this one today, ma'am?" "Just this one," I confirmed, sliding the envelope across the counter. "It's very important that it arrives quickly. Priority mail then." "Oh, yes," I said, surprising myself with the warmth in my voice. "It's definitely a priority." He stamped it with official authority, and I watched my message disappear into the postal system's machinery. In 2 days, maybe 3, Shane would open his mailbox and find my response to yesterday's abandonment. No phone call this time. No chance for him to interrupt or dismiss or redirect the conversation. Just my truth, delivered in terms they'd finally understand. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. The morning air tasted cleaner, sharper, full of possibilities I hadn't considered before. Revenge, I was discovering, had its own particular sweetness. They taught me that I wasn't the real grandma. Time to show them what the fake one could do. The law office of Richardson and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of a historic brick building downtown. Its mahogany-paneled walls lined with legal volumes that seemed to whisper secrets about other people's family dramas. I'd driven past this building countless times over the years, never once imagining I'd one day sit in their plush leather chairs, planning the systematic dismantling of my own family's expectations. Margaret Richardson was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 45, with silver threading through her auburn hair and eyes that suggested she'd witnessed enough human cruelty to develop a professional immunity to shock. Her handshake was firm, her smile cautious but genuine. "Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming in. Your phone call yesterday was intriguing." She gestured to the chair across from her imposing desk. "Estate planning can be emotional, particularly when family relationships are strained." Strained. Such a delicate word for betrayal. "My relationship with my son has become complicated since my divorce," I said, settling into the burgundy leather. "I need to ensure my assets reflect my current reality, not past assumptions." Margaret opened a fresh legal pad, her pen poised. "Tell me about your current will." The document I'd drafted 5 years ago felt like ancient history now. Shane was the primary beneficiary, inheriting the house, my retirement accounts. Everything except specific jewelry pieces designated for the grandchildren. It had seemed so natural then. The logical progression of generations, mother to son, the family home staying in family hands. "Everything goes to my son Shane, with provisions for my grandchildren." The words tasted stale in my mouth. "I want to change that completely." Margaret's pen didn't move. "Completely? Shane and his wife have made it clear that I'm no longer considered essential family. Yesterday, they abandoned me on Thanksgiving to spend it with my ex-husband's new wife, calling her the real grandma." The professional setting made the words feel less raw, more factual. "If I'm not real family, then I shouldn't leave them real inheritance." For the first time, Margaret's composed expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. That's unfortunate, but estate planning based on emotional reactions can sometimes. This isn't emotional, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. This is practical. They've demonstrated their priorities. I'm simply aligning my estate with their demonstrated values. Margaret set down her pen and leaned back. Tell me exactly what you want to do. The plan had crystallized during my sleepless weekend, forming with the same methodical precision I'd once used to organize school fundraisers and holiday celebrations. Remove Shane and Marissa entirely. Create a trust for my grandchildren, Destiny and Harvey, but with conditions they must meet to inherit. What kind of conditions? Annual visits. Meaningful ones, not obligatory holiday appearances. They need to visit me at least once per year, every year, until they turn 21. Real visits, spending time, having conversations, maintaining an actual relationship with me. Margaret made notes, her expression thoughtful. And if they don't meet these conditions? The trust dissolves. The money goes to charity. I'd researched this part extensively online, cross-referencing legal sites until my eyes burned. They inherit nothing. That's legally possible, though unusual. What about your other assets? This was where my weekend research had led me down unexpected paths, discovering philanthropic organizations I'd never known existed. My house goes to the women's shelter downtown. They've been operating out of that cramped building on Elm Street for 15 years. My home has 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, space for families to rebuild their lives. Margaret's pen moved faster now, capturing the details of my systematic redistribution. My retirement accounts? Educational scholarships, specifically for first-generation college students who've aged out of the foster care system. I'd found this charity through 3 degrees of internet separation, starting with articles about inheritance planning and ending with heartbreaking stories of young adults facing the world without family support. Kids who know what it's like to be abandoned. Jewelry and personal items? The important pieces go to the Historical Society. My grandmother's engagement ring, my mother's pearls. They have stories worth preserving. The rest gets sold, proceeds to charity. Margaret looked up from her notes. And the wedding china, family heirlooms? The question hit deeper than I'd expected. The china had been a wedding gift from Dylan's grandmother, a woman who'd welcomed me into their family with such warmth that I'd named my hope chest after her. 12 place settings of Lenox with the delicate rose pattern, stored in felt-lined cases and brought out only for special occasions. Auction it, I said finally. Let someone who will actually use it buy it. Someone who will fill it with real family dinners, not empty promises. Margaret finished writing and looked across the desk with professional concern. Mrs. Patterson, these are significant changes. Have you considered how your son might react? Legal challenges to the will? Let him try. The words came out harder than intended. He spent the last year showing me exactly how little I mean to him. Now he gets to live with the consequences of those choices. What about your ex-husband? Any claims there? Dylan forfeited any claim to my inheritance when he forfeited our marriage. I straightened in the chair, feeling my spine align with my resolve. He chose Savannah and her ready-made grandmother role. Let her support him in his old age. Margaret nodded slowly. I'll need to draft this carefully. The conditions for your grandchildren's trust need precise legal language to be enforceable. When would you like this completed? As soon as possible. I opened my purse and pulled out my checkbook. What's your retainer? For work of this complexity, $1,500. I wrote the check without hesitation, my handwriting bold and certain. This was the most expensive decision I'd made since the divorce, and somehow, the most satisfying. One more thing, I said, tearing off the check. I want Shane and Marissa to receive official notification of their removal from the will. Not the full document, just notice that they're no longer beneficiaries. Margaret raised an eyebrow. That's not typically necessary. They'll find out eventually. I want them to find out now. While the Thanksgiving betrayal is still fresh, while they still think my love comes without consequences. I handed her the check. Can you send it this week? Certified mail, return receipt requested. Perfect. Margaret clipped the check to her legal pad. I'll have preliminary documents ready for your review by Friday. The full will should be complete within 2 weeks. I stood, extending my hand. Thank you, Margaret. For the first time in months, I feel like I have some control over my future. Her handshake was warmer this time. Mrs. Patterson, I see a lot of family conflicts in my practice. Most people struggle with cutting off children, even when they've been hurt. I'm not cutting them off. I corrected. I'm simply requiring them to earn what they previously took for granted. The grandchildren have until they're adults to decide if I'm worth an annual visit. Shane and Marissa have already made their choice. Walking out of the law office, I felt the November air differently, sharper, cleaner, full of possibility rather than regret. The legal documents would arrive at Shane's house within days, probably before he'd even thought to call and apologize for Thanksgiving. He'd open his mailbox expecting bills and advertisements, and instead find official notification that his inheritance had evaporated like morning fog. $1,500 to rewrite my legacy. $1,500 to transform from discarded grandmother to architect of consequences. It seemed like the bargain of a lifetime. The high from my lawyer visit carried me through the rest of the week. But it was Thursday morning's social media scroll that transformed satisfaction into surgical precision. There, glowing on my phone screen, was Savannah's latest Instagram post. A perfectly curated tables cake featuring my mother's crystal stemware and my grandmother's silver serving pieces. The ones Dylan had claimed during our asset division, arguing they'd been gifts to the family, rather than specifically to me. The caption read, "Thanksgiving leftovers taste better when served on heirloom china. So grateful for these beautiful family pieces that make every meal special. Hashtag bless grandma, hashtag family traditions, hashtag heirloom love." Family pieces. My throat constricted as I zoomed in on the photo. There was my mother's gravy boat, the one with the tiny chip on the handle from when 5-year-old Shane had knocked it over during Christmas dinner 26 years ago. The silver cake server my grandmother had carried in her hope chest from Ireland in 1943. The crystal wine glasses Dylan and I had received as a wedding gift from his Aunt Martha, who'd saved for months to buy them because she wanted us to start married life with something beautiful. Savannah was using my history to build her Instagram brand, turning my family's legacy into content for her social media empire. 347 likes. Dozens of comments about how lucky she was to have such gorgeous vintage pieces. She was literally wearing my life like a costume, just as I'd suspected. But seeing the evidence displayed so casually online felt like watching someone dance on my grave. But two could play the documentation game. I spent Thursday afternoon in my spare bedroom, the one Dylan used to call my museum room, because I kept the most precious family artifacts there. Glass display cases lined one wall, filled with items too delicate for daily use but too meaningful to store away completely. My grandmother's jet mourning brooch from 1952. My great-aunt's seed pearl necklace. The garnet ring my mother wore on her wedding day, passed down from her mother and her mother before that. These pieces had survived the divorce because Dylan couldn't see their value. They weren't obviously expensive like the crystal or silver, just old costume jewelry and sentimental trinkets, as he dismissively called them during our property settlement. He'd wanted the flashy stuff, the items that screamed wealth and status. I'd wanted the pieces that whispered stories. Now those whispered stories would become my weapons. I started with the mourning brooch, lifting it from its velvet-lined case with reverence. Black jetstones arranged in an intricate floral pattern, surrounded by seed pearls that had yellowed slightly with age. My grandmother had worn it to every funeral for 30 years, including my grandfather's in 1954. She'd given it to me when I turned 16, along with the story of how her own grandmother had worn it to mourn 3 children lost to influenza in 1918. "This brooch has held more grief than any piece of jewelry should," she told me. "But it's also held more love. When someone you care about dies, you wear this and remember that grief is just love with nowhere to go." Love with nowhere to go. How perfectly appropriate. The County Historical Museum occupied a restored Victorian mansion on Maple Street. Its burgundy exterior and wraparound porch made it look more like a wealthy family's home than a repository for local artifacts. I'd visited here countless times over the years. Field trips with Shane's elementary school classes, afternoon strolls with the grandchildren, quiet solo visits when I needed to remember that the past had weight and substance. Director Patricia Hartwell greeted me in the museum's main hall, her smile genuine but curious. We'd served together on the library board for 6 years, bonded over shared frustrations with budget cuts and community apathy toward preserving local history. "Morgan, what a lovely surprise! Are you here for the new textile exhibit?" "Actually, Patricia, I'm here about a donation. I opened my purse and withdrew the small jewelry box containing the mourning brooch. I'd like to contribute to your permanent collection. Patricia's eyes widened as she lifted the brooch from its cushioned interior. Morgan, this is exquisite. The craftsmanship is incredible. Probably 1940s or early 1950s. 1952, to be exact. It belonged to my grandmother, Catherine O'Brien Patterson. She immigrated from County Cork in 1943, carrying this in her hope chest along with her wedding dress and 3 silver spoons. I'd rehearsed this part, wanting the story to be perfect. She wore it to mourn her husband, her siblings, her friends, anyone who mattered enough to grieve properly. The provenance is wonderful. We have very few pieces from Irish immigrants of that era. Patricia turned the brooch over, examining the simple pin mechanism. Are you certain you want to donate this? It must have tremendous sentimental value. That's exactly why I want it here. I pulled out the handwritten note I'd prepared. My carefully crafted legacy statement. I want it displayed with this placard. I want people to learn about Catherine O'Brien Patterson, about the women who came before us and the grief they carried with grace. Patricia read my proposed text aloud. Mourning brooch, circa 1952. Worn by Catherine O'Brien Patterson to honor the deaths of loved ones. Donated in memory of Morgan Patterson. Left behind but never forgotten. May this piece remind visitors that love endures beyond betrayal and history belongs to those who preserve it. Morgan. Patricia's voice carried concern. This sounds rather final. Are you feeling all right? I laughed, the sound surprising us both with its lightness. I'm feeling clearer than I have in years, actually. My family has decided I'm not worth their time, so I'm ensuring my legacy lives somewhere that values preservation over convenience. Patricia's expression softened with understanding. Family disputes can be so painful. Are you sure this isn't something you might regret? Patricia, my ex-husband's new wife is currently using my mother's china to build her social media following. My son abandoned me on Thanksgiving to spend it with the real grandma. They want to erase me from their story, but they can't erase me from history. I gestured toward the brooch. This piece will outlive all of us. In 50 years, someone will read that placard and know that Catherine O'Brien Patterson existed, that she mattered, that her granddaughter cared enough to preserve her memory properly. Patricia nodded slowly. We'd be honored to accept this donation. When would you like the installation completed? As soon as possible. And Patricia, I'd appreciate it if you added it to your newsletter and social media announcements. Sometimes the most important donations deserve public recognition. She smiled with the kind of warmth reserved for fellow conspirators. I think a feature story would be appropriate. Local woman honors family legacy through historical preservation. We could run it in next month's community newsletter. Perfect. The newsletter that everyone in town received, including Dylan and Savannah, including Shane and Marissa, including every social circle that had watched my marriage implode and wondered what happened to poor Morgan Patterson. That sounds wonderful. I shook Patricia's hand, sealing the deal. My grandmother would have loved knowing her brooch would educate future generations about Irish immigrant experiences. Walking back to my car, I felt the same lightness I'd experienced leaving the lawyer's office. Another piece of my strategic puzzle falling into place. Savannah could post her Instagram photos with my stolen china, but she'd never be able to claim the stories. Those belonged to me, and now they belong to history. The museum would feature my donation within weeks. The newsletter would circulate throughout our small community. And eventually, inevitably, Dylan and Savannah would visit the museum. They attended every charity gala and social function in town, always eager to see and be seen. When they did, they'd find me waiting in glass cases and carefully worded placards. My name permanently etched into local history, while theirs remained forgotten footnotes in other people's stories. My grandmother's grief brooch would outlast their marriage, their happiness, their carefully curated social media presence. It would whisper the true story long after their lies had been forgotten. Some legacies, I was learning, were simply too important to leave to family. The momentum of reclaiming my narrative carried me through the weekend. But it was Sunday evening's mindless social media scroll that provided the perfect opening for my next move. Marissa had posted again, a carefully staged photo of herself, Shane, and the children gathered around Savannah's dining table. Everyone wearing coordinated autumn sweaters that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The caption made my blood simmer. So grateful for 3 generations under one roof. There's nothing like family traditions and making memories with the people who matter most. Blessed to have such an amazing support system. Hashtag family first, hashtag 3 generations, hashtag grateful, hashtag blessed life. 3 generations. The people who matter most. The casual erasure of my existence, packaged in Instagram perfect prose with strategic hashtags designed to build her influencer brand. Marissa had accumulated nearly 4,000 followers by marketing herself as the ideal wife, mother, and family coordinator. Local businesses paid her to feature their products. The PTA had made her their social media coordinator. She'd built an entire secondary income around projecting family perfection. But perfection, I'd learned, was fragile. It only took one crack to shatter the entire illusion. I walked back to my dining room, where the remnants of Thanksgiving still lingered. I'd left everything exactly as it was that night. The candles burned down to stubs, the place settings still arranged for 5, the centerpiece wilting but hauntingly beautiful in its decay. It looked like a museum exhibit, The Abandoned Holiday, 2024. The lighting was perfect. Late afternoon sun slanted through my lace curtains, casting golden shadows across the empty chairs and untouched plates. The scene told its story without words. Hope, preparation, abandonment, solitude. It was honest in a way Marissa's curated content could never be. I took 17 photos from different angles before finding the one that captured the full emotional weight of that night. Me, sitting alone at the head of the table, my hands folded in my lap, eyes slightly downcast but not defeated. The empty chairs seemed to lean away from me like disappointed guests. The elaborate place settings looked almost accusatory in their perfection. But it was beautiful, too, tragic and dignified and undeniably real. The caption took me 43 minutes to write. Each word needed to be perfect, truthful without being vindictive, heartbreaking without being manipulative, powerful without being preachy. I wrote 17 versions before settling on the one that felt exactly right, cooked for 5, 8 alone. Real love doesn't forget. 9 words. 37 characters. A complete story of betrayal and resilience that left nothing to interpretation while naming no names. I posted it at 6:23 p.m. on Sunday, right when local social media engagement typically peaked, after dinner, before Sunday night television, when people scrolled mindlessly through their feeds while pretending to help children with homework. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Linda Hoffetter, my former neighbor, commented within minutes. "Oh honey, my heart breaks for you." 23 likes on her comment alone. Janet Morrison from the library board. "Some people forget where they came from. You deserve so much better." Sarah Chin, who'd worked with me on the school fundraiser for 3 years. "This made me cry. Real family shows up." But it was Rebecca Walsh's comment that really started the avalanche. "Wait, wasn't this the weekend Shane and his family were supposed to visit? I remember you mentioning it at book club." The small-town network activated like a telephone tree from the 1950s. People who'd watched Shane grow up, who remembered me bringing homemade cookies to every school event, who'd witnessed my devotion during Dylan's mother's final illness. They began connecting dots that Marissa's perfect family post had carefully obscured. By Monday morning, my post had been shared 47 times and commented on 86 times. Not viral by Instagram standards, but devastating by small-town social media metrics. In a community of 12,000 people, where everyone knew everyone's business within 3 degrees of separation, this was the equivalent of front-page news. The comments section became a digital support group for abandoned grandparents and forgotten family members. Margaret Kowalski shared her own story about being excluded from her daughter's wedding. Tom Bradley talked about not seeing his grandchildren since his son's remarriage. My simple post had opened a floodgate of similar experiences, creating a community of people who'd been quietly enduring their own versions of family rejection. But the real impact wasn't in the likes and shares. It was in the spaces between the posts, the conversations happening at the grocery store checkout, in the pharmacy line, during school pickup. I learned about these secondhand through friends who felt compelled to report back to me with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "People are talking, Morgan," my neighbor Carol told me Tuesday morning while retrieving her newspaper. "Janet from the flower shop asked me if it was true that Shane and Marissa ditched you for Thanksgiving. I didn't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied, deadheading the last of my chrysanthemums. "The truth speaks for itself." Wednesday brought the first real consequence. Marissa called, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Morgan, we need to talk." "Hello, Marissa. How was your Thanksgiving?" The pause stretched long enough for me to count 3 heartbeats. That post of yours is causing problems. What post? Don't play games. You know exactly what I'm talking about. People are asking questions. Uncomfortable questions. I settled into my kitchen chair, suddenly fascinated by the conversation. What kind of questions? About why we weren't there. About family loyalty. Rebecca Walsh cornered me at Target yesterday, asking if everything was okay between us. Her voice climbed an octave. I had to lie and say you were sick. Interesting choice. You could have told the truth, that you were at a real grandma's house having a wonderful time. Another pause, longer this time. That came out wrong. I was stressed. And Marissa, I posted one photo, one caption. I didn't mention your name, Shane's name, or anyone's name. I simply shared my Thanksgiving experience. But people know. In a town this size, everyone knows who your family is. Your post makes us look terrible. Does it? Or does it make you look exactly like what you are? The sharp intake of breath on the other end told me I'd hit my target. Morgan, please. Can you take it down? This is affecting my partnerships. Sunset Boutique called this morning asking if there were family conflicts that might reflect poorly on their brand association. Sunset Boutique. The local clothing store that paid Marissa $300 per month to model their seasonal collections. Her first domino beginning to fall. I'm sorry to hear that, Marissa, but I can't take down the truth. It's not the whole truth. You're making it seem like we abandoned some helpless old woman when really we just had other plans. Other plans? I repeated slowly. That's one way to describe choosing between grandmothers. Savannah's parents were visiting. It was important family time and I'm not important family. The question hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Finally, Marissa's voice returned, smaller now. Of course, you're family, but it's complicated. It doesn't feel complicated from where I'm sitting, Marissa. It feels quite simple, actually. Thursday morning brought news from my friend Helen, who worked part-time at the elementary school. The PTA moms are buzzing about Marissa. Apparently, her social media coordinator position is under review. Something about maintaining the organization's reputation for family values. Friday's revelation came through my hairstylist, whose sister worked at the local bank. That daughter-in-law of yours lost another sponsorship deal. Something about a juice cleanse company not wanting to be associated with family drama. I never commented on any of the secondary posts about my situation. Never added fuel to the fire or guided the narrative in any particular direction. I simply let the truth resonate in whatever way it needed to, trusting that people would draw their own conclusions about a family that abandoned their matriarch on Thanksgiving. The beauty of small-town social dynamics was their organic justice system. No one needed to explicitly condemn Shane and Marissa's behavior. The subtle shifts in community regard were consequence enough. Fewer likes on Marissa's posts, questions that followed them at public events, the quiet judgment of a community that still believed in certain fundamental values about respecting your elders. By the end of the week, Marissa's follower count had dropped by nearly 400 people, and her engagement rates were in freefall. The perfect family brand she'd spent 3 years building was crumbling. Not from any attack I'd launched, but from the simple weight of truth. All I'd done was sit at my table and tell my story. Everything else had been their choice. Both the initial abandonment and the community's response to it. Sometimes I realized the most powerful revenge was simply refusing to hide other people's shame. The months following my social media truth-telling settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in years, quiet, purposeful, and entirely my own. Spring brought the museum's newsletter featuring my grandmother's brooch, complete with a full-page spread about preserving immigrant legacy through thoughtful donation. Summer delivered Margaret Richardson's meticulously crafted legal documents, officially sealing Shane and Marissa's removal from my estate. By autumn, when the first hints of Thanksgiving preparations began appearing in store displays, I felt something I hadn't expected: anticipation. Not the desperate hope of previous years, but a calm certainty about exactly how I wanted to spend the holiday. This year, I shopped for one. The experience was surprisingly liberating. No mental calculations about Shane's preference for dark meat or Marissa's gluten sensitivities. No anxiety about whether Harvey would eat the green bean casserole or if Destiny might suddenly develop a new food aversion. Just me, wandering the grocery aisles at my own pace. Selecting exactly what appealed to me. A small heritage turkey from the local farm. Fresh cranberries for sauce that would be either too tart nor too sweet. but exactly how I liked it. Butternut squash soup, something I'd never made when cooking for the family because Dylan claimed it was too fancy, and Shane insisted it looked weird. Sweet potato soufflé with real maple syrup instead of the marshmallow-topped version the grandchildren demanded. For the first time in decades, my Thanksgiving menu reflected my tastes, my preferences, my vision of what a perfect meal should be. The preparation felt like meditation. No rushing to accommodate arrival times or dietary restrictions. No stress about timing multiple dishes to finish simultaneously. I started cooking Tuesday morning, moving through each recipe with the unhurried pleasure of someone creating art rather than meeting obligations. Wednesday evening, I set my table, one place setting, but not in a way that suggested loneliness or abandonment. I positioned my chair at the head of the table, facing the windows that looked out over my back garden. The good china, what remained after Dylan's divorce pillaging, gleamed in the late afternoon light. Fresh flowers from my own garden created a centerpiece that didn't need to accommodate conversation or serving dishes. One wine glass, catching the last rays of November sunshine. It was beautiful, elegant, intentional. Thursday morning arrived crisp and bright, the kind of November day that made bare tree branches look like architectural drawings against a pewter sky. I woke without an alarm, without anxiety, without checking my phone for last-minute cancellations or schedule changes. The house was perfectly quiet except for the soft jazz playing from my kitchen radio and the gentle bubbling of stock simmering on the stove. I dressed carefully, not for anyone else, but because the day felt worthy of ceremony. The burgundy dress I bought for myself last month, paired with my mother's pearl earrings. Lipstick applied with the same care I'd once reserved for special occasions with extended family. This was a special occasion, I realized, just not the kind I'd previously understood. The meal preparation became a dance performed for an audience of one. I basted the turkey while humming along to Duke Ellington. Stirred the cranberry sauce while watching squirrels perform acrobatics outside my window. Arranged rolls in a basket with the same attention to presentation I'd once lavished on dinner parties for 12. At exactly 2 o'clock, the time I'd always served Thanksgiving dinner, I lit a single candle in the center of my table. Not the elaborate candelabra of previous years, but one perfect taper in my grandmother's silver holder. The flame cast dancing shadows across my solitary place setting, transforming what could have looked like sadness into something that felt more like sanctuary. I poured wine, a bottle of Pauwelief I'd been saving for someday, and raised my glass to the empty chairs that no longer felt accusatory. To Catherine O'Brien Patterson, I said aloud, who taught me that dignity survives everything. And to Morgan Patterson, who finally learned to choose herself. The toast felt silly for exactly 3 seconds, until I realized that speaking my truth out loud, even to an audience of furniture and flickering candlelight, was the most honest thing I'd done in years. The food was perfect, not because it was flawless, but because every bite reflected my choices, my preferences, my idea of what comfort should taste like. The turkey was herb-crusted rather than traditional. The stuffing contained wild rice instead of white bread. The wine paired beautifully with flavors I'd never been free to explore when cooking for other people's expectations. Halfway through my meal, I began laughing. Not the bitter laughter of last year's abandonment, but genuine amusement at how long it had taken me to discover that cooking for myself could be an act of love rather than resignation. I photographed my plate, not for social media, but for memory. This moment deserved documentation. The doorbell rang just as I was considering dessert. For a split second, my heart performed its old familiar leap. Maybe Shane had changed his mind. Maybe the family was here after all. But the feeling passed quickly, replaced by mild curiosity rather than desperate hope. Through the peephole, I saw Emma Costanos from next door, her 8-year-old daughter Sophia beside her, both holding a plate covered with aluminum foil. "Mrs. Patterson!" Sophia's voice carried through the door with the enthusiasm only children could generate. "We brought you cookies!" I opened the door to find 2 faces glowing with the kind of uncomplicated warmth I'd almost forgotten existed. Emma looked apologetic. Sophia looked delighted. "I hope we're not interrupting," Emma said. "Sophia insisted we bring these over today. She's been talking about you since we moved in." Sophia stepped forward with the confidence of someone who never learned that approaching neighbors required complicated social calculations. "My mom says you remind her of her grandma in Mexico. She was really nice, too, and she always smelled like vanilla." The words hit me with unexpected force. Not the comparison to a grandmother, though that was lovely. but the simple recognition that I existed in someone else's story as a positive presence, that my daily life, my garden tending, my wave from the front porch had registered as kindness in a child's world. "Would you like to come in?" I heard myself asking. "I was just having dessert." 20 minutes later, Sophia was explaining her elaborate theory about why squirrels were probably secret agents, while her mother and I shared coffee at my kitchen table. The formal dining room felt too ceremonial for this spontaneous connection. But the kitchen, with its warm light and lingering aromas of the day's cooking, felt exactly right. "This house always smells amazing," Emma said, cradling her coffee mug. "Sophia asks every time we walk by if we can stop and visit the cookie lady." "I don't actually bake that many cookies," I admitted. "It's not about the cookies," Emma replied with the wisdom of someone who understood metaphor. "It's about feeling welcome." They stayed for an hour, filling my kitchen with conversation that had nothing to do with family obligations or social expectations. Sophia told me about her school play, her pet hamster, her theory that Thanksgiving was really a celebration of squirrels preparing for winter. Emma shared stories about adjusting to small-town life after growing up in Los Angeles, about finding community in unexpected places. When they left, hugging me goodbye with the casual affection of people who plan to see each other again soon, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This Thanksgiving hadn't been about what I'd lost. It had been about what I'd found. Not just peace, but possibility. Not just solitude, but the freedom to choose my own connections. Later that evening, as I was washing my single-place setting and storing leftovers in container size for one person's meals, my phone buzzed with a text from Shane. "The kids have been asking about you. Can we set up a visit?" I dried my hands carefully before responding, taking time to consider my words. "They know where I live. We'll be here. One visit a year unlocks their future." His reply came quickly. "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what it says. Your children are welcome here anytime. You and Marissa are welcome here when you're ready to treat me with the respect I deserve. The legal documents you received explain the rest." I turned off my phone without waiting for his response. Whatever he needed to process about the new terms of our relationship could happen on his own time. I had dishes to finish, a candle to blow out, and a profound sense of contentment to savor. Standing in my kitchen, surrounded by the peaceful aftermath of a perfect Thanksgiving, I understood that I hadn't been seeking revenge at all. I'd been seeking freedom. Freedom from their expectations, their casual cruelty, their assumption that my love came without conditions. They taught me that I wasn't the real grandmother. I'd learned that I was something better. A real woman with real boundaries who finally understood that the best relationships were chosen, not assigned. Peace, I discovered, was the most satisfying course of all.